All right, you guys. I watched it. I watched it. I watched the Book of Clarence. It was whatever you thought it was gonna be. That's what it was. That's kind of what it was. The purpose of me watching it was to just kind of take notice of some of the deceptive practices that the enemy does. I truly believe that he sprinkles in a little bit of truth with some lies, and this movie was absolutely all a majority of was lies. It was a majority of lies. In this video, I'm gonna do a very, very thorough review because I took notes. I was ready to look for some of the lies around the movie. I took a poll on my Instagram because I was curious to see how many people would actually, go and watch it. And the majority of people said they're not gonna watch it because it was pagan. And you guys are so right. You guys are so right. It was so pagan. And by pagan, I mean like it was like blasphemous. I know how to use pagan in the right way, but I just use that word for anything that's against the Lord. And this movie was that. It was completely against the Lord. Again, there was some truth in it. It was some truth. I'm gonna break everything down. But I think overall it was very deceptive and it would lead you away from the Lord. So without further ado, let's jump in. Let's jump in. So the main first let me tell you about some of the characters. So Clarence, the Book of Clarence, Clarence is like the main character. He's an atheist and he's known as like a troublemaker in like the city, right? He's a non-believer who despises Jesus at first. He calls him as someone that's in the in crowd, him and all his disciples. They're like, look at these people. So really put the religious people as if they were like the beloved people. I don't know why the balloons are going off, but whatever. As they're like the beloved people in the land. Biblically, we know that wasn't the case necessarily. We got Thomas, who was actually a disciple of Jesus, but is in the movie Clarence's twin brother. And they look exactly alike. Like they're twin brothers. And he decides to follow Jesus despite some of the pressures coming from Clarence. Clarence constantly ridicules him for leaving his mom. What type of God will tell you to leave your mom on her deathbed and go and follow him? That's Clarence's kind of approach to the ministry. We're going to break that down. Jedediah is another predominant person in the movie. Clarence owes him money. So we'll talk about that. He owes him money and he's trying to figure out ways to get the money back to Jedediah before he kills him. So that's the whole purpose of this whole false messiah movement that Clarence falls into. Viridia is Jedediah's little sister that Clarence is in love with. But at the end of the movie, she kind of like turns him in and it's this whole thing. I thought she was with him for a second. I thought she liked him back, but I don't know. I think she just feels bad. I think she feels bad about turning him in, but it's too late. Now I'm getting crucified because of you. We'll talk about it. Mary Magdalene is in the movie, and she's in there portrayed completely incorrectly. She's portrayed as the woman that was caught in adultery and then eventually follows Jesus. We'll talk about that as well. John the Baptist. This has got to be the most disrespectful portrayal of John the Baptist. They portrayed him to be completely like religious, crazy. So Clarence ends up trying to give his life to Christ and be baptized. It was fake. It was fake. John the Baptist kind of sniffs it out, but he really portrayed himself to show that Christianity is kind of like a works-based salvation. It has a works metric to it, which is completely false. So you got to come and clean yourself up first a little bit before you come and get baptized. He even prays as he was baptizing Clarence for God to allow him to go into heaven, but then as he gets into heaven to be kicked immediately out. Just completely not in character of the true John the Baptist. Of course, we got Judas in the movie. Judas, I'm telling you, looks just like Tyrese. If you ever seen that movie, Baby Boy, where Tyrese was like the star in, that movie, Tyrese in that movie is 100% Judas. I'm telling you, he looks exactly the same. I thought it was Tyrese for a second. It was crazy. And then, of course, you got Jesus. And to me, Jesus looked just like Shaggy. That song, It Wasn't Me or whatever. We all know the song. Looked just like Shaggy. I mean, looks just like Jesus. It was crazy. So those are some of the characters. There's a few more. There's Mary, the mother of Jesus. There's a few more people, but those are kind of like the notable ones. So let's go ahead and dive into this movie. So the movie starts off with Clarence involved in like a chariot race with Mary Magdalene. I'm guessing this while she was still in the world, kind of just living for fun and all that. They have an accident and then they find themselves in the city square and just kind of like talking. And then Jesus appears. Clarence, says some things against Jesus to, his friend that he's with. I forget his name. I think it's Z or something. says some things to his friend. He's an atheist. There is no God. That's when we also get to see his brother, to which they two have a face-to-face. You can see them kind of standing, opposite of each other. And Clarence is like saying, hey, that's crazy how you got a Lord that will tell you to leave your mom on her deathbed. What's up with that? And that is the first deceptive thing that we notice. It's portrayed that God is wrong by telling you to love him more than your own family, which biblically that's accurate. He says, anyone who loves mother and father more than me is not worthy of me. Clarence later on in the movie has another conversation with Thomas, and he says, you're supposed to honor your father and your mother, right? He doubles down on that, using scripture like how the devil would do to try to portray that Christians are wrong. It's all about the understanding of scripture. But from the world's perspective, which Clarence is posturing himself in, they see that as crazy. Why would your God tell you to leave and abandon your mother while she's on her deathbed? Now, Clarence starts to have this idea about becoming an apostle because he owes money to Jedediah. That chariot race in the very beginning, I think it was for money, but some kid that he kind of grew up with, like, threw a arrow at him or something, or like a dart at him and made him fall. So he lost the race and lost some money. Oh, wait, no, his friend's Elijah. Elijah. So Elijah and Clarence, they hang out all the time. They're boys. Clarence is like, yo, I have an idea. I'm going to be the 13th apostle. And the purpose of being the 13th apostle is to make money, because again, people are constantly giving them money, throwing them money. We see that today. We got prominent pastors that have airplanes and jets and taking elaborate trips. They got big mega churches. It seems like it's a scam. I want to join in on this religious scam. That's completely false, because we know that the apostles couldn't even really make ends meet. They had to leave everything to follow Jesus. They were homeless. They were constantly on the move. They constantly were worried about food. Is completely incorrect. Clarence says, look at Jesus. People are always giving him money. I've never seen him even buy a sandal. He's thinking he's going to get taken care of by being an apostle. So he goes to see Jedediah. They have a conversation. That scene was actually kind of cool. It kind of reminded me of it was cool as far as the portrayal of it. It was definitely worldly. Jedediah is like in what looks like to be a club. He's got people dancing, music going. I like the effort that was put into making that scene. And actually the whole movie, it was pretty well done, in my opinion. It brought us current understanding of how the world is based on our own experiences of living in the world. I thought they brought that together pretty well. But after that meeting with Jedediah, he's like, hey, you got 30 days to give me my money, blah, blah, blah. Clarence leaves and he's like, okay, I'm about to be the next apostle. He has a light bulb go off, and that was kind of like a theme throughout the movie, this actual light bulb that appears. So he goes and meets with the apostles. All of them laugh at him. Now, this is another point of contention I have with the movie. They made the apostles seem like, no, you can't join us. You have to be of a certain character. They actually tell Clarence that you can't be an apostle with us. You don't have the character. Thomas actually tells him that, his own brother. They all laugh at him, and then they say, you know what? We'll make a deal with you. We'll let you join us if you go to this slave master and free all the slaves that are in captivity. The people that are in captivity, one being Barabbas, which is a name you might recall from the Bible. In the Bible, the true story is that the Jews and the people in the crowd desired to have Barabbas come out free and instead crucify Jesus. They had a chance to choose, which one would be free. So it is true that Barabbas was a prisoner, but in the movie, he's a slave, and he's kind of like a gladiator type slave, right? So Clarence is like, all right, I'm gonna go. I got to do this. So he goes and tries to negotiate with the slave master kind of thing. He goes and he says, hey, I need to get all these slaves to come out for free. Like, that's just what it is. And the slave master's like, what? Like, no, right? But he makes a deal. He says, if you beat my champion Barabbas in a one-on-one fight, I'll let you have the slaves go for free. Clarence beats him, right? By his shifty moves and how he's, using his environment to work with him. Barabbas is big and huge. I like how they portrayed him too, by the way. But he ends up winning. And the slave master doesn't hold up his part of the deal. Only Barabbas is free. So now Barabbas is joining Elijah and Clarence. Now, when Clarence comes back to say, hey, I have Barabbas, the apostles still say you can't join us. He then has that conversation with his brother Thomas, and Thomas tells him you don't have the character. At this point is when Clarence says, hey, you're supposed to honor your mother and your father. Emphasis on the mother part. But then he says this: knowledge is stronger than belief. that you people believe in God because you don't have enough knowledge. And because of the knowledge that Clarence has, he knows that there is no God. So Clarence leaves, and now he has this new idea of becoming the new Messiah. And he takes a wise approach. He goes to meet with Mary, the mother of Jesus, and try to get insight on how Jesus does these tricks, right? Mary, of course, is like, they're not tricks, they're miracles. And Clarence is not having it. That whole scene with Mary and Joseph, to me, was very disrespectful as well. It really portrayed the belief of the virgin birth to be crazy. He's like, oh, really? You had a virgin birth? Kind of portraying that Mary was, just sexually active. One thing though that was crazy was, so throughout this movie, there's a lot of lies being told. There's a lot of mistruths being shared about some of the events that took place in the Bible. Like, for example, the woman caught in adultery. They portrayed Mary Magdalene to be that woman when it wasn't. I think some people do believe that she might have been, but she wasn't. Like, she wasn't, at least from my understanding. So they betrayed her to be the woman caught in adultery. They they actually call out this woman named Jezebel and her husband, who seems to have an interest with animals sexually, which is weird. And in that scene, they have Elijah kind of like covering up Mary as she's being stoned. So that whole scene is biblically incorrect. But back to that scene with Mary, the mother of Jesus, she tells about a story about how when Jesus was a child, and they actually go to this scene, how when Jesus was a child and he created a bird out of clay, which is 100% accurate as recorded in the Quran. So I thought that was crazy how you'll use the truth in the Quran, but yet when it comes to the truth of the Bible, they muddy everything. I think there's intention behind that. But nonetheless, he gets his information that he got, but he goes and he becomes very successful with becoming the new Messiah. A lot of people are flocking to him. A lot of people are calling him the new Messiah. And he's getting a lot of attention. He's also leading with that slogan of knowledge is power, which doesn't really make sense because knowledge can't perform these miracles. It has to be a miracle. And he's still trying to show himself to have power to do miracles with knowledge, I guess. It doesn't really make sense. It kind of falls apart. But people are believing him and they're throwing him money. So the same accusation that Clarence is putting on Jesus and the apostles about being like frauds and just like taking money from the people, he's doing the same thing. But as you're watching, you kind of don't really pay attention to that. It's weird. So he's growing, he's getting more popularity. His brother comes to talk to him again, and Clarence kind of goes in on him. And this part I also didn't like. Clarence says again, why would you follow a person that's making you leave your mother? Says he's a false Messiah. He said that you're following or you're using the talking points of the Romans. Now, this is where it's another huge thing I did not like about this movie. It was very divisive. Now, I love the fact that they're portraying the biblical characters in the Bible as they were more than likely portrayed to be historically, i.e. majority dark skin. I do like that because it's just the truth. It's just what it is. And they portrayed the Romans to be historically white, which I believe that was the case as well. But the devil will use some of these truths, mix in some of his nonsense, and push it out. This movie was very divisive, in my opinion. It really portrayed the Romans as what would be the current like white people today. And it talked about some of the truths about like police brutality, for example, and how the Romans would just stop Clarence and his friends, asking for ID, all this nonsense, which is true. I'm speaking of actual facts. Like, I've been stopped for no reason many times. I actually have. It's not just a myth. It's actually true. But the deception that's behind it is it makes you have to choose a side, like this whole us versus them kind of thing. Again, when Clarence says you're saying the same talking points as the Romans, that's kind of like what some black people would say as far as like, oh, you follow that white religion, that white slave master religion. That's a thing. When it's completely nonsense. Christianity was around before Europe became Christian. Christianity was in Africa, it was in Ethiopia, it was in Israel before it came to the white people that enslaved black people. So that's the kind of like mentality of this movie. It kind of seemed, and it portrayed all the white Romans as complete antagonists, which is false because skin color wasn't a thing back then. It just wasn't. It was about you just being Roman. It wasn't about you being white. It was about you just being Roman. And the Romans were oppressing us. There was no skin color thing. The whole skin thing is like a very, very new thing. So I really, really, really did not like that at all. And it's interesting because you barely see anything about the Pharisees. You know what I mean? It was the Pharisees who were also black people, which they showed at the end, just a little snapshot, those were the ones that were trying to bring Christians to death. It wasn't the white Romans. The white Romans were just doing it. They maybe didn't like Christians that much, but they were the ones that sentenced the Christians to death because legally the Pharisees couldn't. Nonetheless, the Romans were in control of the Hebrews and everything. You know, I'm not saying that, but it wasn't like a race thing, how they're trying to apply it now. It was just a you're Rome thing. So there was that angle that was kind of being pushed. And then, of course, Clarence is a nice guy. He ends up, all that money he's making, he ends up going and frees all the rest of the slaves. That's another thing. He's like, what kind of God would allow, slaves to be around and also children to die in the streets and, all those talking points of non-believers. That's a time for another video. All that is easily answered. So Terrence, of course, is seen as this good guy who freed the slaves, right? And he put his life at risk because that money that he was supposed to use to pay back Jedediah of the debt he owed, he used it to free all the people in captivity. So he's seen as this hero, right? So this movie was going pretty bad up until this point. The racial division, the lies about the faith, the whole 9 yards. But then it starts to kind of shift. Elijah, he was protecting Mary Magdalene while she was caught in adultery. She actually was sleeping with Romans. That's what she was accused of. Elijah goes and tries to defend her, and he sees the miracles of Jesus. Jesus stops the stones from being thrown, and he heals Mary's face from all the stones being thrown at her and just the beating that she took. So now Elijah's becoming a believer, and he runs to try to tell Clarence, hey, that Jesus guy is actually real. Like, these miracles are real. Clarence is like, whatever you saw wasn't what you saw. That's nonsense. Bump that kind of thing. So now at this point, Clarence is going to some like party. He's meeting with Verinda. It's all fun. They're playing music and stuff. That's where they play that song I like, Nights Over Egypt. I love that song. But then come to find out that girl was kind of like setting them up to be met by her older brother who is trying to come collect. It's this whole you set me up thing. She's like, I didn't know, yada, yada. So now they have this like conversation. Barabbas is ready to like stand and fight on behalf of Clarence. But then the police come, right? And it's one of those things like, you have no business in this. This is kind of our thing. But these police, the Romans, were antagonizing, just causing trouble for no reason. Again, 100% accurate at times. We see stories over and over again about how these police be doing that. They be planting things to frame people. All that stuff is true. I love that there's truth being brought to light about some of the atrocities that we have in this nation. Like, it's bad. I'm telling you. But I just don't like that it's from a posture of now it's division. It's your scum. They showed Barabbas, running away because he's standing up for Clarence. Clarence is like, hey, run away, like you threatening a cop kind of thing. He's running, and the Roman guy he was acting very, like, he was a good actor. He was playing the Bart. It was crazy. He was like, oh, look, he's attacking me. He's resisting kind of thing. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? He's running away. Like, the whole thing, which is, again, it's true. It happens. You've seen it. We've seen it over and over again. He throws a spear, hits Barabbas in the back. He falls down, all that. Barabbas is known as Barabbas the Immortal, right? He can't die. So it's this whole thing about him being gunned down by the Romans, essentially. And it was like a whole thing. But Barabbas ends up coming back to life. Before that, Jedediah, he's like, hey, I'm not. He's staying firm on Clarence's side, even though Clarence and Jedediah have, beef with each other. They're both coming in union, standing against the police, which I think that's good. You know what I'm saying? I think we should stand up against wrong things, especially things that are like racially discriminatory, right? Anyway, the Romans have this, I guess, charge to go and arrest anyone who's claiming to be a Messiah. Again, that's somewhat true. Like, they wanted to take the one Messiah down, talking about the Bible, but there wasn't two Messiahs. So they capture Clarence. He's going to trial, and he just confesses everything. Hey, this is all a hoax. I'm not really a Messiah. I just did it for money, blah, blah, blah. I owed some money to some people. It was all with it's the girl involved. The Pontius Pilate in that position. I forget his actual name, who he was. It wasn't Pilate. Or maybe it was. I'm not sure who he was supposed to be portrayed as. But he did represent Pontius Pilate in various different ways. I'll talk about that in a second. But Clarence is going through saying, hey, I'm not really a Messiah. The guy that's sentencing him is like, okay, I think you're lying, and I think you're just trying to pretend to not believe you're the Messiah. I think you do think you are. So come up here and you're going to walk on water. And if you do walk on water, then you're the Messiah and I'm going to take you in. And Clarence was like, I can't even swim. Like, what do you mean? Like, I can't walk on water. And he's like, okay, well, then you'll drown and then I'll let you free. He goes and he actually starts walking on water without even knowing. Like, he's like, what is this? And that's Clarence's point where he starts to kind of like believe in God. He's like, that wasn't me. It was God. The Pontius Pilate character is like, if you were to have fallen in the water, I wouldn't have let you drown. I would have set you free, but you are a Messiah or something. So you're going to trial. And he's like, no. So that was kind of like funny, I guess. Oh, wait, they're showing the Pilate thing. They missed it. Now they're showing the Jesus thing. The part that is kind of representative of Pilate was that Pilate actually talks to Jesus. And he's like, hey, are you the king of the Jews? Are you really who you are? Like, don't you know I have the authority to free you? And Jesus is like, the only authority you have comes from above, kind of thing. So that comparison and similarity, I think, was maybe some people might have missed it, but the whole like, I would have saved you if you were drowning. I have the power to save you kind of angle. That was what I gathered from that scene. By the way, behind the scenes, Judas has already started talking to the Romans. And the Romans, again, Judas really was talking to the Pharisees, but Judas is talking to the Romans to kind of bring in this Messiah. As Clarence is on trial, the guy, Pontius Pilate, we'll just call him that. He's like, hey man, I like you. Like, just look, I'll let you free if you just let me know where this real Messiah is. This other guy, Clarence is perceived as a Messiah as well, the new Messiah, but there's also Jesus. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'll tell you who he is. Give me 1,000 shekels. You know what? Give me 2,000 shekels, And then Pilate's like, okay, well, who is it? And he's like, he's saying his name is Jesus, but really his name is Judas Iscariot. So Clarence is trying to frame Judas so Judas can go to jail and not really Jesus, because Clarence is starting to like Jesus. Pontius Pilate's like, what are you talking about? Judas is already on our side. He's already been working for us. And Clarence is like, what? So now because he was lying, now he's like going to jail. He's like, you're going to be crucified. That's what it is. So Clarence is going to get crucified for being a Messiah when he really isn't. Oh, wait, hold on. There also was a Last Supper scene that happened before Clarence was talking to Pilate, trying to, give the location of Jesus. They had his Last Supper scene. And that was also very wrong. It was wrong, especially with how Jesus talks. He wouldn't use like profanity in a way, like how it was done. And so I really didn't like that. But I did like how it showed that Jesus had the power to like pause time. So I thought that was pretty cool. And, he talks about like, hey, one of you guys, he doesn't say guys, says something else, are going to betray me. And everyone's like, what? Like, who? And he's like, the one who, puts his hand with me. After that, everything pauses. And Judas is like kind of kicking back because he knows he's not going to put his hand in there because he doesn't like Mary Magdalene's food. He doesn't like her cooking. So, but then Jesus pauses time, and then now it's like Judas is forced to come through with this prophecy of what Jesus is speaking, in the Last Supper currently in the, in the movie. And he's like, what's going on? Like, I would never eat her food. What are you talking about? And he's like, something's in you wants to tell the truth, but then something in you doesn't. Like, it was a whole thing. It was that part was actually kind of cool. But yeah, so now he dips his hand in there and everyone sees him, and it's like, oh snap. And then they all kind of like, jump him, I guess. So anyway, fast back forward, Clarence is in jail. And oh man, the real Jesus is talking to this homeless man. So throughout the whole movie, there's been this homeless man that everyone's been ignoring, and he's very dirty. And Jesus walks up to him and just hands him a bunch of money, or like touches his hand to the point where that money just comes out of his hands. It just keeps coming. And he uses that money to go and get cleaned up. And then we find out he's super dirty. He's actually a white guy. And everyone in the salon that's cleaning him up is like, oh my gosh, you look just like Jesus. So now they're saying he's the Messiah, right? So he's going around acting like the Messiah, just handing out money to people. And everyone's loving him. Again, there's this task for all the Romans to arrest all the Messiahs. So he eventually gets grabbed up and he's crucified along with Clarence. On the way up to Clarence's crucifixion, he's carrying the cross. The mom is crying out. That's when she actually says, they always doing this to our babies. They're always doing it to our babies. Again, talking about how the police are always killing our kids. Again, that stuff is historically true. That really happens. Black people are getting killed by police more in an unfair rate than the rest of the world, right? It's true. I just really wish that that truth could have been portrayed in a way that isn't necessarily like divisive. Now the truth hurts. Like say what the truth is, and that's what it is. But we're not like putting the other people down. But nonetheless, I'm kind of like glad that they did talk about it. You know what I'm saying? They talked about some of the shortcomings of this nation and a lot of the nations in the West. Like it's bad. It's actually all over the world. You know, there was a scene about the Clarence and his friend being stopped by the police, asking for ID, you know, for nonsense. You know, I got pulled over for a faulty tail light when my tail light wasn't broken, like it was on. So it's true. People just get bored and they just pick on you, I guess. I wish that truth was portrayed in just having the truth, not the truth mixed in with making the other people to be scum. So, I mean, it is what it is. Now, in this crucifixion scene, this was, I thought, very well done. Like, as far as like the brutality in it, like, I don't like brutal stuff. The whole movie wasn't necessarily that, I mean, it was kind of gory a little bit, but it didn't have any like nudity or anything. Like, it wasn't that bad. Like, I'm glad it wasn't too much like sexual things. I mean, there was some, but it wasn't like overbearing. Nonetheless, I still wouldn't, like, if I had kids, I wouldn't take my kids to watch it. I actually wouldn't watch it if I was also like a new believer. I would not watch it. Just don't, because you might accidentally try to adopt some of the things that are complete lies as some truth, and we need to just read the Bible. But nonetheless, parents are getting crucified. It's like the way his eyes like red and stuff. It was, you know, the way he's carrying his cross and he like spit comes out of his mouth. Like it was there's some details in there that were pretty good, I think. And then we see that white false Messiah that just became the Messiah recently. Now he's alongside Clarence getting crucified. Clarence looks up and says, "Father, forgive them. You know, they don't know what they're doing." It goes over to that white Messiah dude, and he said, like, bump that, like, no, bring fire and brimstone down to them for all they're doing, you know, like, yada, yada, yada. Another biblically incorrect thing that they did was they pierced Clarence's side, and that's how he died. That's not how Jesus died. Now, it was a practice during crucifixion to break the criminals' like legs so they don't walk away, you know, while they're still alive. But Jesus was already dead. In order to see that he was dead, they pierced his side. So he didn't die from getting stabbed. Again, that might be a misunderstanding for people that maybe are really new in their faith. So Clarence gets stabbed. He dies at the hand of the Romans. And as he's dying, his mom yells out some pagan stuff saying, "Find your way back to me." Like, find your way back to me. Again, on some like reincarnation type thing. That was crazy. And then we see, you know, it's kind of like a fast forward. Jesus comes to Clarence's tomb. He lays hands on the rock. The rock breaks down and he resurrects Clarence. And then he talks to them. He says, "Well, now you know that I am the resurrection and the life." Clarence says, "You know, my Lord." Like, it seems like he really believes. And then Jesus walks away, and then Clarence has another idea. So throughout the movie, when he wanted to be a 13th apostle, when he wanted to start his own ministry as being the Messiah, and then now at this point, he would have like a light bulb flare out, right? As if saying he has an idea. And I thought it was like kind of funny. But this leads you to like kind of wonder what the idea is, because the movie kind of ends after that. So we see Clarence is now not an atheist anymore. He believes in God. He specifically believes in Jesus. He calls him his Lord, and he has this idea. So it leaves you as the viewer kind of wondering what this idea is, you know, right? The movie ends. And to me personally, I think the idea might be just a life now living in servitude, because Clarence does seem like he was kind of selfish. So maybe he has an idea of like spreading the gospel, I think. But then at the same time, I'm like, what if he has an idea to just, you know, as he came back to life, he has an idea to like con people again, right? Because you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, now there's a ghost, right? Because every idea he had before, it was related to scamming people, being the 13th apostle, the Messiah, the whole nine. So it kind of makes you think, and I did like that ending. Kind of makes you think. But yeah, overall, the movie was pagan. Overall, I thought it was well put together. Again, culturally, the scenes, the music, the clothing, some of the historical accuracies. You know, I liked. I really overall did not like the historical lies. I didn't like the racial division that made you feel like you had to be like on a certain side instead of just all loving each other, especially since back then the whole skin color thing was just not a thing. Like it just wasn't. I forget the year when skin color became a thing, and it's a form of white supremacy of how it came to be. But back then it was more so just where your nation is. Like, oh, I'm a Hebrew, or I'm a Roman, you know, I'm a Gentile, I'm a Greek. You know, it wasn't like a race thing. But I did like that they did have historically accurate skin color of people. Jesus was not white. Like, we historically, it just doesn't make any sense. The apostles were not white. I believed all of them were black. I truly believe that. I was reading in the Bible, Paul, who was a Pharisee amongst Pharisees, right? He was a Hebrew amongst Hebrews. He was mistaken to be an Egyptian. And we know Egyptians were dark skinned. Jesus, when he was running away from Herod as a baby, he hid in Egypt. Why? So you can blend in. So all these accuracies showing how definitely Jesus was not white. And then, of course, if you guys know my testimony, I've seen Jesus. He was not white. So I do like that. And my thing is, if people have a problem with that, which I know some people will, like, why does it matter? Why does it matter? My thing is, why does it matter if the truth is just being told? If it doesn't matter, then let's just tell the truth. These are what these people look like. Like, we're not putting you down. Don't get your feelings hurt, kind of thing. So I'm sure that'll be the case with people that are criticizing the movie. But yeah, overall, from a Christian perspective, the biggest criticism, the blasphemous disrespect of Christianity, the apostles. I mean, John the Baptist, like, what? The whole works-based salvation thing. Like, you got to first go and free these slaves, and then you can be an apostle. Or you got to change your character first, and then you can come be our apostles. No, many are called, few are chosen. Come as you are. Jesus will clean you. The gospel will clean you. And this is the misconception that the world keeps thinking about Christianity. That's just not true. No one ever said that ever in their life. It's just what the world puts in their head. So I think that was very, very detrimental. And overall, it was a put down against Christianity as a whole. You don't need to watch it. You don't need to watch it. I don't know. But if you do watch it, let me know what you think. I'll be curious. Love you guys. Take it easy.